Taken Aback, the YouTube show that will really activate your almonds. On September 12, 2004, a mother and daughter from Wisconsin were attending church together. The service was almost over when a small bat flew in from an open window and began circling around the church ceiling. The people there tried to ignore it, but the bat was being disruptive and behaving strangely. Eventually, an usher grabs a prayer book and hits the bat with it, sending it flying to the ground. It lay on the floor, disoriented and twitching. The young girl, who had arrived with her mother, was a huge animal lover and decided to get up from her seat and have a look at the bat. Very carefully, she picks the bat up by the tips of its wings with the intention of taking it outside and freeing it. Just as soon as she walks through the door, however, the bat begins screaming and flailing around. Startled, the girl lets go of it, but the bat clings to her hand and sinks its teeth into her finger. Horrified, she flings the bat into a nearby bush and clutches her bloody hand to her chest. When she gets home, her mother cleans the wound with soapy water and bandages it up. And while the girl, whose name is Gina Giese, remembers her family not being terribly happy about the bat bite, nobody could have predicted what would happen next. Fast forward 3 weeks later, and the finger where the bat had bit Gina is starting to go numb. She begins to feel ill, but doesn't initially make the connection that it could be from the bat bite. Over the next 24 hours, however, things begin to go downhill rapidly for Gina. She feels dizzy and nauseous and develops double vision. Fearing the worst, her family rushes her to the ER, and by the time she is admitted, she can barely walk. After doing a series of diagnostic tests on Gina, the doctors ask Gina about any recent contact she's had with animals, and the family remembers the bat bite 3 weeks earlier. It's then that the doctors begin to suspect rabies. Rabies is a viral disease spread by mammals. Humans who get rabies usually get it from being infected by a dog or bat. Luckily, it's fairly uncommon in the first world due to the popularity of vaccinating household pets. But if someone happens to be bit by a rabid animal, the prognosis is grim. The symptoms of full-blown rabies are monstrous and better suited for a horror movie than a medical textbook. The disease, which causes inflammation of the brain and spinal cord, is 100% fatal once symptoms start to show. It causes aggressive behavior, fear of water, foaming at the mouth, erratic movements, paralysis, and eventually death. Individuals showing signs of rabies can't be cured, and there is little outside of palliative care that can be done for them. In many parts of the world, they are strapped down and left to die horrific deaths, isolated from the outside world. At the time that Gina had been bitten, nobody showing symptoms of rabies had survived. But Dr. Willoughby, an infectious disease specialist at the Children's Hospital, still wanted to try and save Gina's life. After consulting medical textbooks on the subject, Dr. Willoughby decided to try something new. Gina was put in a medically induced coma and given large doses of ketamine and antivirals to protect her nerves and brain while the virus continued to rage inside her. The idea behind this treatment was to buy her immune system enough time to fight off the virus, while the coma would stave off the worst of the brain damage. At this point, however, young Gina is delirious and convulsing. Her parents are told she is only hours from death, and without any other viable options available, her family consents to the experimental treatment. At the time, Dr. Willoughby didn't know if his plan would work, or what kind of state Gina would wake up in. Nobody at the hospital could even guarantee that Gina would wake up at all, but surprisingly, Gina does wake up. 7 days later, after the initial prognosis of being given only 4 hours to live, Gina is brought out of her coma. At first, she's very weak, too weak to even open her eyes. The doctor gently pulls back her eyelids and asks her to look in her mother's direction. Slowly, her eyeballs move about the room and finally rest on her mother's face. It is at that moment that the doctor knows that somebody is still inside, and that despite all odds, Gina has become the first unvaccinated person to survive rabies. The treatment used to revive Gina Giese became known as the MILWAUKEE Protocol, and since saving her life in 2004, it's been attempted on numerous other rabies patients around the world. One such patient was 14-year-old Mateus da Silva of Brazil, who lived along the Unini River with his two siblings, Lucas and Maria. For a reason that isn't entirely clear, one evening, a group of vampire bats flew into the Silva home and began roosting there. During the night, the bats began flying about the room and attacking the children, biting the children approximately 20 times each. While the situation may seem alarming to outsiders, the father of the children claimed to have been bitten by bats hundreds of times before in the past without ill effect, so he didn't initially see the situation as dangerous. Unfortunately for the Silvas, however, the bats had rabies, and all three children soon became ill. Lucas and Maria quickly died of their infections, but 14-year-old Mateus was admitted to the hospital, where he was treated with the MILWAUKEE Protocol there. For days, Mateus lay in the hospital ICU, battling the rabies virus and teetering on the precipice of death. This went on for 40 days until the doctors deemed him to be free of the rabies virus. Initially, the Silva case was considered to be a success, but when Mateus awoke, however, it became clear that he was not entirely himself. He could neither move nor feed himself, and for 3 years now, he has been lying in a near vegetative state in the Brazilian hospital, alive but unable to live independently or care for himself. The Silva family, who lives 20 hours away by boat, have been fighting to bring Mateus home, but have so far been unsuccessful due to financial difficulties. Tragically, the whole family has been thrown into poverty because of their son's ordeal, and they are no longer able to keep up with their bills. The Silvas pay the equivalent of the Brazilian minimum wage every month to care for Mateus, and soon they will also need to pay for the physical therapy that Mateus will inevitably need in order to gain higher levels of functioning. In 2020, the Silva family said to a news outlet, "We are getting by, surviving. It is God who sustains us. There are times that we have depression, feeling pain, feeling bad. It is hard. The more time passes, the more we are hopeless." Do you think it was the right thing to do for the doctors to attempt such an expensive and experimental treatment on such a financially vulnerable family? What would you have done if you were a doctor in this position? Let me know in the comments down below. To this day, the MILWAUKEE Protocol has been attempted dozens of times and has only saved a handful of lives, many of whom ended up with major complications like Mateus. It's now thought that the bat that bit Gina may have carried a weaker strain of rabies, which could explain why she had such a good outcome while other rabies victims have not. When the CDC and the Peruvian Ministry of Health teamed up to test the blood of people living in the Amazon, they discovered that many people had rabies antibodies in their blood, yet could not remember ever contracting the disease. This suggests that there may indeed be weaker strains of the virus out there. This contradicts the commonly held assumption that rabies is always fatal. If COVID-19 has taught us anything, it's that people can have radically different outcomes from contracting the same disease. While some people have symptoms so mild they don't even remember getting sick, other people can become incapacitated and can even die. While Gina Giese's recovery from rabies is remarkable, she did receive quite a lot of physical therapy after her infection. Equine therapy was prescribed to help sharpen her reflexes and strengthen the connection between her mind and body. This type of therapy has been used successfully on people with brain and nerve damage, as well as children with autism and other behavioral problems. The WHO classifies rabies as a neglected tropical disease, which means that it is considered to be poverty-associated. Should rabies victims in the third world somehow survive this horrific disease, many still face an uphill battle trying to regain function of their bodies, and most will not get the physical therapy or medical support needed to do this properly. Worldwide, the primary victims of rabies are mostly children, as they may be more inclined to approach animals that are behaving strangely. While in the US, rabies is rare due to the popularity of vaccinating pets, rabid dogs are still a big problem in the developing world. The global fight against rabies begins with vaccinating these dogs, as a single rabid dog can infect a whole village of people. Well, that's it for my show. I hope you learned something new. Please like and subscribe if you would like to see more of my content, and feel free to leave a comment down below. Bye!